It's like when everything is going right, we seem to be in happy space most of the time, but when things suddenly change, it takes all that happiness away and then we again feel miserable. So that getting on and off is not, being consistent and it takes away your perpetual happiness. So how to not, fall into that situation multiple times in life so that your circumstances are carrying you, giving you ups and downs in life rather than you try to remain steady.
Sounds like you want to be in the spiritual world. Is that the idea? But we're in the material world. So you won't find happiness in all circumstances in the material world. Now, just a little transcendental teaching. When Krishna leaves Vrindavan and goes to Mathura, what happens? Okay, go on. Krishna. Looks like there's unhappiness in the spiritual world too. What do you think? When Krishna leaves Vrindavan, is that happiness for the residents of Vrindavan? What to do? You can't go stand here, you can't go there. What to do? You're the answer. That which appears to be happiness in the material world is an illusion, seduction. No, the happiness of the man who drinks. Is that happiness? Etc. That which appears to be happiness is an illusion. The part of the problem of material life is illusion appears to be reality. So we want the perpetual illusion, or the illusion of perpetual happiness, when there isn't even happiness. By Krishna's words, this material world is dukkha alayam, and it's impermanent, ashashvatam. Now you see it, now you don't. Ashashvatam. Even the dukkha doesn't stay, even the sukha doesn't stay. Neither of them stay because they're just reflections of reality. Now then in the spiritual world, the feeling, this is an important teaching, the feeling of separation from Krishna is the greatest sadness, and at the same time it's an intensification of the hankering for Krishna, which is spiritual happiness. It's a science of rasa. But a scientist that knows the science of rasa understands, but at the same time, the gopis cry, they unmada, they go mad with their feelings of separation from Krishna. We were discussing that a little bit. So here's a subtitle: Overcoming Illusion and the Pursuit of Happiness. So a natural question is, what's real happiness? If you want perpetual happiness, what is it? Now I heard about a movie called Matrix. Have you heard that movie? Matrix? That's the Matrix. which would you like, the reality pill or the illusion pill? That's the, so the reality pill is there's difficulties in life for a reason. In material life, there's a reason, and that is turning our back on Krishna. What do you see? Darkness. Even if there's glimmers of light, it's ashashvatam. It's temporary, and it's a reflection of real light. It's not real light. How do I learn to be happy? First is this distinguishing the difference between reality and illusion. I mentioned this today at the temple. I'll mention it again. 112 Bhagavatam. It's a very nice verse. Dharma projita kaita votra paramo nirma saranam satam vedyam vastavam akravastu shivadam tapatrayon mulanam. The verse is saying that this Bhagavatam rejects projita, dharma that's kind of a dharma. The so-called dharma literally means cheating dharma, because there's no such thing as cheating dharma, but pretentious dharma. All pretentious dharma is kicked out from this Bhagavatam. And the Bhagavatam, Vedyam Vasa Vatsu, the Srimad Bhagavatam establishes Vastu, or reality, distinguished from illusion. And the illusion, here's a nice image of illusion, that's Maya, Mahamaya. And Mahamaya, as the center indicates, is conducted by three modes: goodness, passion, ignorance, the three modes of the material nature. The material nature moves by the direction of Maya. And in this region of darkness, that abode of the illusory energy, we're searching for happiness. And one of the common phrases, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. And is that really what happiness is? Well, a sober person would say no. Here's a nice BBT illustration. This is the bird in the cage, the lady that's very involved in the cage, meaning the covering, and polishing the cage so assiduously that the bird in the cage for which the cage exists is neglected. And when the bird in the cage is neglected, the bird can croak. The poor bird. But the purpose of the cage is like deha and dehi, the body and the occupier of the body, the cage for the bird and the bird. So the human form of life is meant to nourish dehi, to achieve self-realization. One who's pursuing self-realization is getting closer to what real happiness is. But neglecting then is intermittent, ashashvatam, whatever it is, it's temporary. There's a nice verse from the 11th canto Bhagavatam. This is from the Uddhava Gita section of the Bhagavatam. Uddhava is receiving instruction from Krishna. A conditioned soul undergoes great trouble to obtain a little happiness after struggling in material life, which is full of hardship and hypocrisy. One may receive a little sense gratification, but this illusory pleasure in no way offsets the burden of suffering one must bear to obtain it. Now there's so many such sayings on any path of spiritual life, certainly the Bhagavad Dharma path. So don't invest the sense of expectation of happiness in the illusory features of the material energy. That's simple. then where you invest energy instead. It's very simple in transcendence. However, like this donkey and the carrot, the donkey is so eager to get the carrot, to get the fruit of reward for his labor as the donkey working very hard, that is his happiness, that little carrot. And supposing one gets a little carrot, we're in the human form of life now. We get a little carrot, we want more carrots, and more carrots, and more carrots, and it leads to greed. Greed is more than what we need. So, according to the Ishopanishad, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has made arrangements for our maintenance. Each living entity, not just human, all living entities, that their necessities are arranged for. Isavashimidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jihatina chaptena bhunjitaha magradaha prasyasudana. We shouldn't accept things beyond. But most people that don't have a spiritual sense of who is the real proprietor, they want more, and they want more. Whatever it is they have, they want more. Because their happiness isn't found in more, so they want more. Greed. There's many of you know all these things. There's some statistics that says if the world's population was consuming the resources of nature as the United States consumes the resources of nature, we'd need 9 Earth planets. Problem is we only have one. And then renewable resources and recycle, and still it's insufficient resources. So what to do? There's only one Earth planet. There's not multiple Earth planets. What to do without the factor of greed? Again, this is on the topic of what is real happiness. If one thinks one doesn't know spiritual happiness, then one seeks material happiness. And seeking material happiness has its problems. Here's a nice drawing that shows a sword at the bottom. This is again from Srimad Bhagavatam, again from Uddhava Gita. The network of material desires is created when one falsely thinks that he can establish himself permanently in the material world. So permanent happiness, happiness that doesn't go away and turn into something else. This binding network should be cut by the sword of detachment. That's the sword at the bottom. What's that detachment? Otherwise, one will be forced to wander in the illusory network of Maya with no understanding of liberated life in the spiritual platform, on the spiritual platform. So detachment from what? Detachment from two things, minimally. The expectation that senses contacting sense object equals happiness. What's the verse in Bhagavad Gita that says that? Yehi samsparsha jabhoga dukkha yonaya evate. It's like when I was little, I don't know what game people play these days, but when I was little, I was bought a toy. It's a Jack in the Box. And the Jack in the Box, you crank the thing, and the little music would play, and after a little music would play, the lid would come flying up, and this puppet that looked like a Joker would come out, and everyone would laugh. Then we push the guy back down again, and wind the thing back up again. Do it hundreds of times. Jack in the Box. With music. And that was, then we do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And again, and again, and, eventually find something else to do. But people do it again and again, knowing that there isn't any real happiness, but the happiness is the jolt of the senses that says that's happiness. That's child's play, but adults do child's play also. The network of senses contacting sense objects, samsparsha ja, Bhoga. We all know what bhoga means. It's what's before you offer to Krishna, that's bhoga. And you offer to Krishna, wait for Krishna to accept, and then it becomes prasadam. So bhoga is samsparsha ja. Samsparsha, the senses contacting the sense object. Ye he samsparsha ja bhoga dukkha, that's the jack in the box. Dukkha yonai evate. The yoni, or the place of birth of dukkha, is the expectation of happiness through senses contacting sense objects. The formula is very simple. Now, what happens when some, as the previous reference says, there's some sensation keep people chasing after it, but the sensation is limited and temporary. Dukkalayam ashashvatam. It's laced with misery, and it's temporary. It's just how it is. And how come we don't see how it is? Because there's some tantalizing seduction of Prakriti that says, here's Prakriti, here's material nature that has no husband. It's like a prostitute, a woman that has no husband, and she's very attractive and very enticing, and one thinks, I can exploit this woman. So material nature that's seen as without a husband or a father or a protector is exploitable. And that's what greed is. Exploitation of the seductive features of material energy that look like happiness, and instead is dukkha. Again and again, as many times as you wind the jack in the box, the guy comes out and makes a little sound. We do it again and do it again. And at different stages of life, it's the feature is different, but the principle is the same. Therefore, we find, here's just verse after verse, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. Same verse, samsparsha bhoga. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Because our topic is happiness that doesn't end. A wise man doesn't take part in happiness that isn't real happiness, and sure enough, it's over, whatever it is, that samsparsha ja. Prahlad Maharaj, in his wisdom, one is happy as long as one does not endeavor for happiness. As soon as one begins his activity for happiness, his conditions of distress begin. He's just saying it, right? It's not really true. It's really true. It's really true. So what are we supposed to, the advice of Prahlad is not become a vegetable or a stone or inactive or inert. His advice is, instead of endeavoring for happiness on the material plane, we should endeavor for pleasing in a loving relationship with the Supreme. This is his instruction to his classmates. Instead, people have this for their picture. Sense pleasure mandates renunciation of enjoyment. After some period of time of eating all these delectables on the top, how much can you eat? No, one may be a glutton and eat and eat, but at some point in time, it's no longer pleasure. In fact, it's repulsive. So that's the tongue. And the nature of lust. Oh, it's not working. Let's see. There's supposed to be a sound. It says the sound of fire, but it didn't work. There's embedded. We'll see if the next one works. And then here's death personified. Oh, Krishna standing at the door. She's telling her husband. He says, "We're out of any time minutes." When is death coming? Anytime. We're out of any time minutes. Let's see if this one works. Oh, sorry. I know what's. Hang on. Doesn't work. Here's the other one. Let's see if the other one works. No. Sound of fire in the background. So death, and the happiness. Oh, sorry about that. Happiness comes to an end. The sense pleasure comes to an end, and life comes to an end. When it becomes satiated, it burns like fire, and then it's all over. For another time around, and another time around, and as many times around as it takes to come to the platform of what your question was, or the topic that you wanted to discussion about happiness that doesn't end. And that's spiritual happiness, because spirit souls don't have a beginning or an end. And there's variety, just like the variety of Krishna leading Vrindavan and the residents of Vrindavan feeling great separation from Krishna. But that's an intensification of their love, which to us looks like sadness, but it's a type of ecstasy. That's the teaching of Rupa Goswami. So our material existence has these parts. The body at the very top, the mind, lower left, the intellect, and the self that animates the gross and subtle body. And that happiness of the self within is what real happiness is. And when that real happiness within is achieved, then naturally the senses, the mind, and the intelligence become enlivened and satisfied. That's our spiritual teaching, isn't it? Yenatma suprasidati. Prasana and suprasana. And atma suprasana. Prasana means satisfaction or happiness. Suprasana, very happy. Atma suprasana. Happiness on the spiritual platform brings enlightenment, natural enlightenment. Light goes into the body, mind, and intelligence. Here's another verse from that same section of Uddhava Gita. Material desire is undoubtedly the cause of the greatest unhappiness, and freedom from such desire is the cause of the greatest happiness. It's not exactly the freedom from the material desire. It's replacing the material desire with spiritual desire, or replacing the expectation of happiness of one's senses with seeking the happiness of Krishna's senses. And that brings the greatest happiness, because that's the suprasana, or atma suprasana. Similarly, Bhagavad Gita, same 5th chapter, just before that other verse. A liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. No, always in trance doesn't mean their eyes are closed and they're sitting in a straight posture. It can mean that. But in trance means consciousness is fixed on Krishna. Question, is it possible to have one consciousness fixed on Krishna while doing everyday things of life? Not only it's possible, that's the design. The design is the senses are to be engaged in the service of Krishna, the master of the senses. And while engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses, something else has to be operating behind that. That's the mind that's absorbed in Krishna. That is, the function of my sense activity is the satisfaction of Krishna. And if I accept those things that are pleasing to Krishna and act in that consciousness that's called Krishna consciousness, then all varieties of activities are not only possible, but just completely natural. I'll share something I think is relevant to this topic. One of the things that I explored when I was a college kid was a type of meditation. I was living in a house, a big farmhouse with many rooms, and so we had many people from different backgrounds living together under one roof in the house. So one of the persons in our house was, he knew something about Zen Buddhism. So we kind of made a decision, we made a little Zen room or Zendo in the house. And many of us, I was one, we got up very early, just the discipline of rising early. You know, for a college kid to rise early, that's an austerity. Rise early. And we sat for about 2 hours every morning in the little Zendo. And the practice was, because this person had learned in a nearby city from where our college was. So there was a Zendo, 3 Pillars of Zen was the book. We read the book, we did the Zen. So you sit in a straight posture early in the morning, and you look at a blank wall. We had some like, I don't know what you call it, like a mat, just a white blank mat across the wall. And then we sat on, little seats, little, cushy pillows. So you could sit in a straight, with your back straight and look at the wall. And the discipline was, here's the discipline. You observe your thoughts, but you don't interact with them. Because most of the time, we identify with what's in the mind, we interact with what's in the mind, that becomes our life, generally. So this is the discipline where you don't do that. It's like, this was my experience anyways, it was like looking at the sky, and here comes a cloud. So as the cloud comes, it's moving across the sky. That's the thought in the mind. But you don't interact with it. You just observe it and let it go. And after some time, the cloud disappears. And as the cloud disappears, here comes another cloud. Sometimes there's a bunch of clouds. And eventually, after sitting there for 2 hours, it becomes a clear sky. Your thoughts become very quiet, which means the mind has become quiet and still. It works. And it was very powerful. I found it was very powerful discipline. And then what happened after that was we got up and we did our other stuff. And as soon as we started doing other stuff, the mind became very cloudy again, filled with stuff, instead of the detachment that's being mentioned here. So my understanding from that discipline is A and B. It's powerful, and B, it's artificial or it's not natural, because natural is we do stuff. So how do you keep your consciousness, the natural question arose, how do you keep your consciousness fixed in that detached space while you're doing everyday activities of life? Eating, sleeping, working, moving about, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, with mind fixed on him. So there's a discipline that helps to achieve that. Sound vibration is the principal discipline. Hearing of the Mahamantra and hearing of the scripture, etc. And as discussed at the temple today, there's a qualitative way of hearing. There's a mechanical way of hearing, and there's a qualitative way of hearing. And when the qualitative way of hearing is, you at least strive for it. Don't become complacent with mechanical. Strive for qualitative hearing. Then it has an effect of calming the mind. And then you may, as this Zazen practice does, you become detached from the mind and what's in the mind. The mind is like the sky is like the background, and then there's the thoughts and the activities and the emotions, etc., feelings and all of that. That's stuff in the mind. And then there's you, the observer of all that stuff. But it's not you. You're the observer of the stuff. And then you can redirect your mind. The higher platform is not just detachment, but you redirect the mind towards the Supreme. And that's what this verse is saying. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Again, a liberated person is not attached to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance. Doing stuff, but in trance doesn't mean you're oblivious to what's going on around you. You can be very, very aware of what's going around you, including stuff that's going on in the mind. But what the seat of consciousness becomes, at least the goal is for the seat of consciousness, that's the soul proper, to be directed towards the Supreme Soul. Concentrating on the Supreme, as the verse says, unlimited happiness. So there's the answer to your question. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text 21. Now, even it doesn't have to be while you're sitting doing your japa in the morning, or doing your deity worship, or doing any one of the direct devotional practices. You become accomplished at the direct devotional practices. And that consciousness stays with you after some time. It just becomes part of your being. And it's not a false promise, it's what happens. As Krishna consciousness matures or bhakti matures, it becomes what you carry with you all the time from within. Here's our last image. Whoops, going in here. No. See the self, but this is Bhagavad Gita chapter 6. See the self by the pure mind, and to relish and rejoice in the self, in that joyous state when it's situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses, established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. So there's a requirement to have the greatest difficulty not shake you. There's shelter, real shelter. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material content. Actual freedom from all miseries arising from material content. By contacting matter, this the realm in which we live is a place of duality. As you know, sometimes and sometimes, like its second chapter Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. Sometimes there's happiness, sometimes there's distress. Sometimes there's honor, sometimes there's dishonor. Sometimes it's winter season, sometimes it's summer season. Sometimes it's a place of duality. And it's always changing. Always. Always, always, always. So it's impermanent, or Shashvatam. And by design, there is misery. The purpose for the misery is to teach us this isn't where real happiness is, my dear friend. You want real happiness? It's not here. By design, it's not here. So if it's by design, why go to the trouble of creating a place where it has misery? Why creation? That's a good question. I attended a Rath Yatra once, more than once, and I was introduced to a Chinese lady because they knew I went to China. So she, very enthusiastic lady, middle-aged lady, she said, I just have one question. Why creation? So there's two parts to why creation. Trishti, in the language of Srimad Bhagavatam, it's one of the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam. The activities of Vishnu to bring about creation. One is to allow the living entity. One of the answers, what I said to the lady is because we wanted it. That's why. No, living entities want to enjoy separately. However, oil doesn't mix with water. Water doesn't mix with oil. We have nothing to do with material nature. Fundamentally, nothing to do with it, but we're so entangled in it. So, one of the purposes of creation is the entanglement. The other purpose is liberation. It gives facility to become free by choice, and then making a series of choices, a consistent series of choices, following proper standards. One who strives by right means is assured of success. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. That's the second feature of creation. So it's freedom from material contact. That's a purpose of creation. So that someone who's drowning they really want to get out of the water because they're drowning. So the receiving of the means to get out of the drowning position it's a big relief. And it's not just a temporary relief, it's a permanent relief. So as Krishna ends Bhagavad Gita with Arjuna, please deliberate on this fully and then do what you wish to do. So we all have that opportunity, especially those of us that have received the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a great fortune because many people don't have that. They struggle without any real solution. Some idea, some notional idea, but no real solution. Not even, as we discussed this afternoon, not even knowing what the real problems are. The real problems for death, disease, and old age is not just some conflict that may arise or something or something or something. Before coming here to Virginia, 2 stops before I was in Houston, and I had to delay my visit to Houston because they had a hurricane that came through. And the hurricane knocked over hundreds of trees all over the place, and there were about 4.5 million people without electricity for 5 days. We don't realize how hooked we are on electricity until you don't have any. It was tough. Some places got electricity more quickly. So how did devotees handle that situation? Because it's a distressful situation. They took the opportunity to render service. bring prasadam to people that didn't have any. So because without all the details of all of what they did, they figured out a way. They had generators, or they had something, and without electricity, they were able to cook. And they were able to cook and offer to Krishna and distribute prasadam to people that had no prasadam. And besides the goodwill that they gained by doing that, there was another kind of satisfaction. The satisfaction of being in service to Krishna and service to Krishna's parts and parcel living entities, etc., etc., etc. So even when there's distress, there can be an opportunity for service that brings happiness. When that's your purpose of life, even in the greatest of difficulties. And what helps us in that is the regular chanting of the holy names. This is the Yoga Dharma, as we all know. And we have it, and those things that come very easily, it's easy to take it for granted. Easy to take it for granted. But it can save our life. I'm going to tell a little story in the end. Somebody, Mahamantra here. Did I send you that story of the Russian soldier?
No.
No. Here's the Russian soldier story. I'll send it to you, then you can forward it. There's war going on between Russia and Ukraine. And one Russian young man was conscripted. That means he had to join the army. Just before he joined the army, somebody, a devotee, met him and encouraged him to take Bhagavad Gita and pray to Krishna. So he took the Bhagavad Gita. Doesn't mention whether a donation or anything like that. So he's carrying around Bhagavad Gita in his military uniform. He had a bulletproof vest that he wore, and he put it in his vest pocket. During combat, he was shot, and he was taken to the hospital. And as they were taking him to the hospital, they took off his bulletproof vest, and they found the bullet that was shot at him stopped right in the middle of Bhagavad Gita. And it shows the picture of, the picture of the Disciplic Succession was right in the center of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's picture, the bullet. Bhagavad Gita saved his life. That was not the main message, but Bhagavad Gita can save our life. We take it for granted. The holy name can literally carry us to the spiritual world. But we take shelter. And the message of Bhagavad Gita can carry us to the spiritual world, to the place where there's eternal happiness. But it's not found here. No such thing. No eternal anything here. Dukkhalayam Shashvata, by design. Let's see if there's some discussion. This is a great place for a program. You have, look, turn around and take a look. You got a lot of friends. It's a good space. It's a good space. Very nice. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Maharaj, will it be correct to say that in material world, if we want to be happy, or the source of happiness in material world is through service?
Yes. The source of happiness is through service, because that's the link between us and the source of happiness. It's the connecting link. The source of happiness is Rasavaya Saha, Krishna. That's the source of happiness. Now, here's another detail, just drill on that a little bit. There's a nice teaching in Kapila Dev's chapter 25 of Canto 3, Kapila Dev's teaching the process of devotional service. And Kapila explained to Devahuti that some people, they just like service. And that's an entry level. It's not necessarily for Krishna. They like service. But if Krishna is in the picture, then service to Krishna gets in the picture. And that's the beginning point. You know, like humanitarian, philanthropic, and welfare, because there may very well have been other people that were serving food to people who had no electricity and thus had no means of cooking and no food. There probably were other people doing similar things. But to do that, service-mindedness for the satisfaction of Krishna makes all the difference between material and spiritual. So the medium of devotional service, yes, but it's the emphasis I'm making is on it's for the satisfaction of Krishna. That's where the real happiness comes. Yeah? Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. There are two parts to my question. The first part is we repeatedly hear that from Bhagavad Gita that there are four major problems in life: birth, death, old age, and disease. But those problems doesn't become focus. All the petty problems that happen in the day-to-day life take priority, and these fade away into the background. And the second part is the mind has a tendency to focus on, oh, he or she said this to me, did this to me, and keep replaying it again and again.
Yes.
And becomes difficult to get over that. Mm-hmm. So what would be your advice, Maharaj?
Well, my advice is Krishna's advice. And Krishna's advice is to tolerate those situations. That's the dictates of the mind are to be tolerated. Tamsatiksha subharata. And they come and they go. And then, sometimes we're praised when we really didn't do anything, when we're given some honor or some distinction or something. And sometimes we're dishonored when we didn't do anything. And sometimes we're dishonored when we do something. so there's you tolerate it. Now, that's what you do with the mind when it comes to some hardship or difficulty or being misunderstood or something like that. Meanwhile, we have our compass inside. The compass inside says these two things. We act as far as we can according to standards of virtue and proper conduct. We try to live our life that way. That's mode of goodness. And then the compass that guides that one is let my life move closer to Krishna day by day with each of the decisions that I make and how to respond to things that you just described. Let me make my decisions of how to respond in such a way that it's going to align myself with the path to Krishna. And meanwhile, living by virtue and the proper conduct as far as I can. And as I get some correction, that's beneficial. Not like, I got punished or something. Beneficial. Kindness, Krishna's kindness. Yeah, sure.
You also mentioned about...
And it's easy to say all those things. That's another thing to live one's life by the principle. But it's a principle. And a principle-centered life leads you in that direction. And that something that helps is chanting, because chanting clears, and hearing spiritual sound vibration clears away the garbage, or the distractions and the grumblings and the anger and the frustration and the lust and all the other stuff that just covers our purpose-driven kind of lifestyle. So this hearing spiritual vibration regularly is so important. Go ahead.
You were also mentioning about observing our thoughts, and the thoughts would just go away after a time. But in that period of time, the tendency to latch onto the thought is just automatic.
Yes, that's conditioning.
So
One can go beyond conditioning. It takes some discipline.
okay.
No, the discipline that I describe is a mechanical discipline, and it can to a degree, at least I call it a bungee cord. You know what a bungee cord is? It's got a hook. It's got the other end got a hook, and it's elastic. You put it around something, and it holds things in place. Then when you're done, you unhook the hook. It goes back to where it was. That's a bungee cord. So the mind is like a bungee cord, because after you stop the discipline, it goes back to where it was. So how do you what's the discipline that is with you all the time? And that's love. The control of the mind and senses, because my mind and senses only go to where love takes me. And there isn't a substitute. Yoga is to make the connection, and the yoga of love is bhakti. And then the connection doesn't break. It's not a bungee cord. It's your natural position. Now, does that answer your question? Okay.
Nowadays, I'm hearing a lot of, I'm doing this for my purification. In the context of hearing it with spiritual ear, actually what I feel is it's the holy name that purifies us. So, how do I allow myself for the holy name to do whatever he wants to do with me?
Well, it's submission. There's the master and there's the servant. The object of love, the abode of love. And accepting the position, not as the enjoyer, I'm doing this for my purification and liberation, my self-betterment, but the self-betterment is included in making the spiritual connection out of loving service. Once that connection is made, to wire yourself towards that by practice and practice and practice and practice, by prayer, by everything, deity worship, and all the activities that draw our life energy towards serving the senses of Krishna, then that the holy name will act in the same way. It's not for self-purification, it's satisfaction of Krishna. I mean, what you're bringing up, not exactly, but I had 2 discussions recently about the principle of trying to become Krishna conscious when I'm still at the center. Is it possible? It's a conflict, but we do it. I'm at the center, and Krishna's at the center, but really it's not at the center. The false ego is very dominating. There are people that it's just so flagrant that that's the place that they're coming from, and they can't see it. So it's disheartening. And the more you try to help them see it, they rebel. Or they have like 16 explanations of why that's not the case. So it's our material conditioning and practice following the path of the previous acharyas. That's our remedy. Mahajano yena katasa panta. That's our remedy.
Pranam Maharaj, can you
Hold
Just-
a little bit, your voice is loud. Yeah, that's good. Go ahead. He's going to control the volume.
a request to give a little explanation or commentary on chapter 5, verses 1 and 2? Because you described or explained a lot of verses from chapter 5, but I specifically just want to hear from you about 1 and 2.
Of Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
Well, what chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita is? It's setting the scene. Who's on this side? Who's on that side? Arjuna throwing down his weapon. Then Krishna saying, you lamenting, I surrender to you. I don't. So the chapter 2 has 2 parts, just to keep it simple. It has a Sankhya section and it has a Karma Yoga section. Sankhya section means spirit and matter, and separating the two because they are distinct. And then you read Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 39. Krishna says, "Now I've explained to you about Bodhi, about Sankhya. Now I'm going to explain to you Bodhi Yoga." Sankhya Yoga, chapter 2. Bodhi Yoga, the other part of chapter 2. And Bodhi means intelligence. But spiritual Bodhi is devotional service without attachment to the fruits of work. So it's a kind of it's teaching detachment through knowledge. First is the knowledge, and then it's working in the attachment on the strength of that knowledge, Bodhi Yoga. So by which you can go to Krishna. Now, chapter 5, we already covered some of the verses, but it's where the knowledge is now in action, in practical activities of life. So, you read the verses. Is that not a long, elaborate explanation, but it's a little simple explanation?
No, I guess. So I think if I understand with my little meager knowledge, I think Arjuna poses a question in 1 about, I think, karma or sannyasa. And then Krishna explains in verse 2 that both are possible, but I think there's a word called yoga sannyasa or something like that. So I think he explains that going to the forest is for certain souls, whereas engaging in duty is for the vast majority, something like that. So just wanted a little more. If you could just give a commentary. I don't have it specific out there, but just those 2 verses, if possible.
Okay.
Maharaj, Prabhu is asking about verse 1 and 2 of chapter 5.
Yes, I got it. Could you have a Bhagavad Gita in your house?
Yeah.
Could you bring it? And I'll read the 2 verses so we'll be right on target with this question. I'll say something while you're getting the Bhagavad Gita. There's a distinction between karma sannyas, or giving up work, and working in devotion. And karma sannyas is one leaves the field of activity and takes up that kind of detachment where I don't do my prescribed duties anymore. I'm gone to the forest and I'm taking renouncing work, and along with work is the duties prescribed for me because of my embodiment. For each of us that have bodies, there's inclinations for work, and dharma is to do work according to our nature within the confines or the guidelines of the codes of dharma. That's detached work. And then some persons, they don't want to do that. Their inclination is more on the renunciation side, the negation side. There's some persons that do that. Krishna has a preference. The preference is engage in prescribed duties, while at the same time always thinking of me. That's Krishna's preference. Here we go. I'll read the verses. You ready? Arjuna said, "Oh, Krishna, first of all, you asked me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely, which of the two is more beneficial?" Krishna replies, "The renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work." Of course, there's explanation. So, liberation means there's different definitions of liberation, but nirvana is one of the definitions. It's cessation of material activity. So I give up material activity, I've ceased material activity. But then in the bungee cord, I have psychophysical nature. How do I stay in that position without shelter in the Supreme? Just giving up work, my prescribed duties, and becoming a renunciate of that type. So they can give a type of liberation, that's what's being said. But better is work and devotion, because that's where there's shelter. Devotion unto whom? Unto the Supreme. So then I'm connected to the Supreme. And that's a permanent position for the rest of my life and after this life. Because they're sheltered. You have something, yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. From today's classes, both in the afternoon and this evening, the two phrases that stand out to me and I wanted to understand a little bit more in terms of practical application is hearing with spiritual ears or qualitative hearing. I'm assuming that kind of hearing, there's a spectrum depending on where one is in one's devotional life.
Yeah.
For someone that is not advanced, how does one kind of assess and recalibrate and make sure that what does it really mean, Maharaj, hearing with spiritual ears? When one
Okay, that's two, you're giving me three questions in one. What does it really mean? And the other question is, one who's not there yet, what do you do to get there? How should I, who am not there, engage myself in hearing to get there? That's really the important question. Well, I mentioned it in the midday class. I'll mention it again. You can look up Nectar of Instruction, text number 7. And there's two key words that tells you adarat, with respect. Prabhupada translates it in that particular case attentively, because that which you have respect for, you're more likely to be attentive than that which you don't have respect for. So adarat commonly means with respect, and therefore attentively. So that's how you should hear. And then audinam is the other word, regularly, or for a prolonged period of time. least daily. Daily, for some reasonable period of time or a fixed period of time, a regulated period of time, striving to be attentive or striving to be respectful of that which is worthy of my respect. And that's how hearing with the spiritual ear is cultivated. That's what we should do. In simple terms, there's more to say. If you want to hear more about that, there's recordings from these Japa retreats on chanting with respect. 2 classes so far, there'll probably be some more coming. Chanting with respect. Find that online. You'll find like an hour and 20 minutes worth of detail on that topic. Chanting with respect. So, chanting means also hearing. You're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, reading Bhagavad Gita, where the recorded message is what the book is. It's Krishna speaking, recorded. It's speaker Shukadeva Goswami speaking, recorded by the grace of Vyasadeva. So we have that sound vibration recorded, and you try to receive it and meditate upon it daily with respect. This is going to pick me up out of my conditioned life. Okay?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. One question is like, when we are trying to tolerate, so that might look impersonal to the other person. So how to tolerate empathically so the other person understands?
Well, what goes on inside and what goes on the outside may not have a one-to-one correlation. In other words, you or any one of us can be socially respectful while at the same time being internally absorbed on another platform than just the social nuances of. Just like a nice example, because we just covered it. Balaram's return to Vrindavan. That he had great affection for all the Brijvasis. And because he was Balaram, because he was a perfect person and very cultured and very refined, with each person, he exchanged with them according to their position. So back to the premise. It's one can certainly be respectful. This is right in the same presentation that I suggested that she regard. A nice example. Yudhisthira came before Dhritarashtra with folded palms, knowing the diabolical deeds that he knew Duryodhana was up to, and he didn't stop it. He could have, but he didn't. So he's like an accomplice in multiple murders of him and his brothers and his wife and etc. And he did nothing. And still he was respectful because he's a cultured person. Now, inside, whether he was feeling something else, externally, he was respectful. Now, not just his relatives, but they're dear to Krishna too. So he's trying to kill those that are dear to Krishna, and he knew it. And it was he with the stick in his hand, but his son, and he knew it, and he didn't stop it. Still respectful. So cultured people know how to be cultured, like this example of Balaram. Different persons, exchanging with different persons according to their position. Peer, elder, junior, you relate differently to different persons according to their position. Culturally. It's not cosmetic, it's culture. And then internal absorption is another thing. For Yudhisthira, he wasn't just being polite, he was being polite, but he had the attachment for Krishna. He did not going to depart from the attachment from Krishna. So, we're not there yet, but that's how we can follow those models and understand at least in principle or directionally, those are things that we can do. Okay? I think we should end. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada Ki Jai.